Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the first in a new series of free-to-attend webinars hosted by Robotics and Innovation magazine. I'm John Thornton, editor of Robotics and Innovation, and your host for today's session, which is sponsored by Elo Touch Solutions. Today's webinar is titled Connecting People, Things and Machines, Interactive Applications as a Key Enabler for Industry 4.0. With industries under constant pressure to improve equipment maintenance, simplify processes, improve efficiencies and cut downtime, a growing number of businesses are transforming to take advantage of Industry 4.0. But to do so, a new set of connected, interactive devices are needed to enable multifunctional, intuitive interfaces. Fortunately, Elo Touch Solutions' touchscreen and compute product portfolio, and particularly its approach to Android, are key enablers for Industry 4.0, helping to unlock data barriers and position manufacturers as forward-thinking technology leaders who value a data-driven culture where employees feel empowered to make intelligent decisions. We have 3 speakers from Elo Touch providing insight into this topic today, including Regional Sales Manager for the UK and Ireland, Jim Foster, Director of Product Management, Paul Futter, and Director of Sales, Brian Atwood. Together, they will explain how to make Industry 4.0 a reality in your operation with cutting-edge technology and applications built to solve your biggest industry challenges. Before we begin, I'd like to encourage viewers to ask questions throughout the presentation via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I'll pose as many of these questions as possible to Jim, Paul, and Brian in the time available following the presentation. Also, a recording of this webinar will be available to view on demand from tomorrow afternoon via www.roboticsandinnovation.co.uk. And with that, I'll now hand over to Brian Atwood to start the presentation section of this webinar.
Thank you, John. So good afternoon. Thank you for joining today. My name is Brian Atwood with Elo Touch Solutions, responsible for sales as well as business development in our industrial segment. And I'll run you through just a quick overview of who Elo is and what we're going to talk about today. As John said, we'll be talking about connecting people and things using Elo's unified architecture. So first of all, who is Elo? Elo has been in the industry for about 50 years. And as a matter of fact, in a couple of weeks, we can officially say 50 years. The company was started in 1971, and we invented the touch screen. On the right of your screen, you'll actually see the patent that was applied for the original touchscreen device back in 1971. Since then, we've been innovating through products such as different touch technologies, as well as integrating our touch technology into different devices. And we'll talk more about that today. We work together with some of our partners, putting solutions out into the market. And we feel that we're a very innovative and inventive manufacturer in this space. So just a quick look on Elo's pedigree. So if you look at where Elo is today, we're heavily involved in several different industries, intelligent retail, as well as service automation. And when we say service automation, there's been quite a surge forward in terms of self-service in retail and quick serve, and Elo's been there every step of the way. Intelligent healthcare, we continue to evolve with healthcare. As most of you know, there's been a lot of healthcare from afar these days when it comes to being connected to our doctors and nurses, and if we're not able to be there in person. In industrial automation, we'll double click into industrial automation and industrial in just a moment, as well as some of our rich history in banking and payments. So this is more of our brag list when it comes to industrial. We have a global footprint and we work with some of the largest industrial companies in the world. A couple of the ones that I will highlight on this slide: Renault, based in France; Amazon, one of the largest factories and warehouse companies in the world; Sita, based in the Americas; JR Automation, also based in the Americas; Kone in Finland, just to name a few. It's an impressive list of companies that we work with today to support their digital transformation in this industry. And now I will hand it over to Jim Foster for a little bit of a look on our products.
Okay, thank you, Brian, for the handover. So, yes, so I'm going to do a couple of slides now on talking about our portfolio from a high level. One of the key points about Elo is that we have the widest portfolio in the market. So, you know, Brian showed the slides about Elo is everywhere and Elo is industrial. That comes because we have such a wide portfolio. We can go from really large format signage, 65 inches, down to customized 7-inch touchscreen components. So there's a really wide range there, and I'll just walk you through a couple of these that you can see on the slide at the moment. So touchscreen components, I mean, that's our heritage. That's where the original patent was for a resistive touchscreen component, and that's still a large part of our business. So whether that's a PCAP touchscreen going into a more of a into an integrator, into gaming machines, or whether that's going into a resistive, into a wheel alignment or wheel balancing machine for a car mechanic, whether it's going into a marine environment with saltwater protection, whether that's there's so many different applications, and we spend a lot of our R&D efforts and a lot of time with our customer base making custom solutions on the touchscreen components. So that's a really big part of our business. And of course, we also use our own touchscreen components on our finished goods as well. So we're a customer of ourselves. Touchscreen display modules, that's something that's a little bit of a hybrid. So that's, for example, where you would take a touchscreen sensor and you would marry that with a display and then the controller, in this case, like a chip-on-flex or a touch controller. And that is something where if somebody wants to integrate into a unit with small space requirements, that's something that would be a really nice, low-profile, cost-effective unit for integrating touch into an already existing environment. We've got various compute devices, and I know Paul will talk about those a little bit more detail later. But those compute devices can range, they can be in Android, and we'll talk a lot about Android. But they can also be on an Intel platform, which can support Windows, or it can support Linux. And obviously, we appreciate in the industrial space, Linux is still it's a big player in this market, as is Windows. And we can support all three flavors of operating system at this point. Touchscreen monitors, I mean, that's something that's more that's been our bread and butter for quite a long time. So that's a touchscreen monitor. That might be a desktop monitor. That might be a wall-mounted monitor used, on a pole, on a wall. It could be mounted into an enclosure. So that's, they range typically from 10-inch up to the 27-inch for the standard format. And then the larger ones that we talk about are interactive signage, which is the 32-inch up to the 65-inch, which is, we call it signage. I mean, really, it's effectively a touch monitor that's typically wall-mounted and used in a signage or interactive way. And again, we can talk about those in a little bit more detail on a later slide. And then touchscreen computers, I mean, that would be an all-in-one, meaning a touchscreen and a compute embedded into one. So sometimes people say tablets, but it's tablets specifically with a battery. But in this case, touchscreen computers are all-in-one devices. And as I mentioned, we work with Android, Linux, and Windows. So if we could have the next slide, please. Just a little bit about the market and why we're excited about this marketplace. The industrial IoT, you can see on the data on the left that it's a growing market, 16% compound annual growth. It's a huge marketplace and growing. You know, it's growing a lot quicker than a lot of the other kind of headline markets that we're in, retail, banking, etc. You know, this is really an exciting market for us. And you know, it breaks down into those categories there. I mean, you guys on the webinar will know, you know, about these much more than your educated crowd, so to speak. So, but smart manufacturing, we see this as a really exciting growth area. You know, we've got lots of products that can really fit into this market. And yeah, a little bit later, Paul will walk you through a factory environment that will show where our stuff is in there. Smart energy, you know, from a home perspective, smart homes, I'm a user of that myself, as many people are, whether it's the doorbells or the heating systems or the security systems. I mean, that's exploding in the consumer area, but also in the commercial area too. Healthcare, Brian mentioned a little bit about the connected healthcare. You know, that's really prevalent these days, of course. But you know, healthcare is a big market for us as well, and we see huge benefits of you know, having this ability to stay connected. Yeah, a lot of the others, I mean, they're pretty self-explanatory. Smart retail, smart city in terms of parking and rental of vehicles and these kind of lighting, you know, smart lighting within cities. Building management, that's something that's not that new really. That's been around for a few years from our perspective, you know, supplying stuff to, whether that's in elevators or lifts, as we would say, or whether that's in, you know, concierge systems into, you know, environments where you can call, ask for assistance within the apartment block, things like that. And then of course, smart transport as well. We all know about the driverless cars and all the different AI stuff behind transport these days. On the right hand side as well, I think even more exciting than the overall scope is the collaborative robots kind of subsector. You know, that's growing, you can see there 36% compared to the overall market of 16. So we see that as, again, as a really exciting area of growth for us, of opportunities popping up a lot in this area. So we'll give some examples, some use cases later, and one of them is specifically in this collaborative robot market. So yeah, so we see these two areas as very exciting for the business. So that was it from me for the moment. I will hand you over to Paul Futter, who's going to talk about our unified architecture in smart factories. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Paul Futter. I'm a product manager for Elo, specifically in our component group. I wanted to talk a little bit today, as Brian mentioned previously, you know, Elo's been in touch for almost 50 years now, and a lot of that time in the retail space, and for sure, pretty much every one of you on this call has touched an Elo screen at some point, whether it's you know, a supermarket checkout or it's a check-in when you check in for a flight, if we can fly again one day. At these type of places, you would have used an Elo screen, even if it wasn't labeled Elo at the time. So we've been really big in these kind of commercial, industrial touchscreens for a long time. And traditionally, we've been very focused on, you know, on Windows, going back to Windows 95, 98, etc., and those type of architectures, right? But maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the company started looking at the wider picture of software architectures, and focused in really on the Android operating system as a potential big play for the company for the future. So we started what we called the work on our unified architecture based around the Android operating system. And we've seen a great deal of success with this operating system and this architecture in the retail space, in particularly in that intelligent retail section, you know, where you have multiple devices within a restaurant that are all communicating together. You can update them all at the same time. You can keep them all on the same image, etc., etc. And that architecture has proved to be really powerful in that. So now we're beginning to look at that and bringing that into more of an industrial environment, into this kind of smart factory area. So with that, we've created this kind of the smart factory overview, where we see applications for our systems and our solutions right within the factory environment. And you know, we have good examples, and we'll share some of those later of this today, and where we have some wins in these design spaces. So you can see this is a kind of very generic factory environment. We have robots, we have machines, intelligent packaging, we have robots delivering parts to the line, and we have applications within here for touchscreens in all of these spaces. So starting at the bottom left here, we have this kind of collaboration space where Jim mentioned the very large format screens. This is where you can see kind of dashboarding, and you can see how your factory's performing, how your operators are running, etc., etc. Moving across to the right here, we have some warehouse and inventory robots. We have good applications there for some of our smaller type screens, and we'll show you a good example of that later on in this presentation. So these robots picking up inventory. It displays it on the screen. The operator uses the screen to interact with it and picks up the inventory and takes it to where it needs to be on the production line. Moving more in towards the middle of the factory here, you see these type of big machines, whether these are CNCs or something similar, right? We have some embedded touchscreens in those for the controls. And again, we'll show you an example of that, an embedded touchscreen within a large industrial machine. Moving towards the back of the factory here, more of a kind of robot production line. There's embedded screens here, right, to show you statistics, to enable you to interact with the machine, etc., etc. Dashboarding again back here on the right-hand side. Multiple interactions in office type environments where you're controlling the equipment. Elevator interfaces. I mean, all of these things are moving more towards this kind of touch screen. And the interesting thing about what the Elo can do is we can bring you this unified architecture to connect all of these pieces together. So we talking a little bit more about products itself. This is new to us. So this will be launched in January of next year, a handheld device for the kind of supervising function. So you can use this, carry this around the factory. You can scan things, connect your operators mobilely with the rest of the system. Down the bottom left here, Jim mentioned already, we have these touch components, and these touch components are really kind of the basic building block of a touch system, and we can integrate those into things like a robot, right? So you see back here on this slide here. To the top right here, we have the large format touchscreens. We see these in factories in the kind of dashboarding. We see them in a lot of wayfinding applications, in boardroom applications where you're collaborating with information. We have all-in-one Android compute engines. There's also a Windows version of that. So these are, you can think of them like a type of tablet. They're not really mobile, but they're an integrated all-in-one touch solution that can be fixed. Something like this, where it's on the machine here. It has its all compute in it, has Wi-Fi, etc. Has a bunch of accessory connectors, and I'll talk a little bit more about those things as we move forward in the presentation. And then we have our traditional kind of touch monitors that we put on workstations, fixed stands on equipment. As Jim mentioned, you can mount those with arms. There's a good example here, mounted on a piece of equipment. It gives you the standard kind of touch interface to the equipment. The bigger piece of this story is really this Elo View system, which is this is what connects everything together, right? So this is a cloud-based content and device management service that Elo wrote about 3 or 4 years ago. This continues to evolve, every year for sure. There's a brand new update coming for it this year, and this allows you to connect all of these devices together. So the power here being that you can not only control each of these devices, you can update the devices, you can make sure your security is up to date, you can ensure that everything's running on the same app, you can lock these devices down remotely. Anywhere any of these individual devices can connect to the cloud, they can then be connected to Elo View, and you can control it from a central point. So that's a kind of overall picture of our Android unified architecture. And then I wanted to talk specifically about a few of these individual pieces. So as I mentioned, new for Elo is this Elo handheld mobile computer. This is launching in January of next year. It's really kind of designed as a inventory management type device. It's purpose built for industrial. So it's really built to be in a factory. It's very mil-spec drop test. It's IP65. It has the scanner and everything built in. It's built on a Qualcomm mobile chipset. And this will be available in January of next year. So we see this as a big thing for kind of that factory environment where you're walking around and you're scanning things. And in the center here, we have what we call our I-Series compute. This is the all-in-one type device. So an all-in-one touch computer. It's available in 3 standard sizes, 10.1, 15.6, and 21.5. The 10.1, all 3 are available in an Android configuration. The 15.6 and the 21.5 are also available in a Windows configuration. So the Android configuration is 8.1 and a Qualcomm chipset. And then the Windows configuration is Windows 10 and Intel. It is also possible that you can run Linux on that Windows version of this device. The interesting thing here for Android is that this is I think it's probably the only GMS certified device that's not a true mobile device, right? So GMS certification gives you access to Google mobile services, so things like the Play Store. So you can access and download apps to these devices. And that's one of the only devices in the world that has that certification that's not a phone or a tablet. So we work very closely with Google on that. This I-Series device has a number of edge connectors. And what I mean by that is there are some micro USB ports on the back and sides of this device. So you can actually connect accessories to that. And we have a great deal of accessories available. And the interesting thing for things like factories and robotics, we have like 2D barcode scanners. We have like NFC readers. So you can plug those in and you get a very simple solution. Mount this thing on an arm, plug in your 2D barcode scanner, and you have an instant inventory check-in device or check-in type solution. There's also, we are working on the next generation of this product, and that'll be launched sometime next year. And that's there'll be 2 versions. There'll be a better cost version with a lower end compute type solution, as we're seeing demand for that from the market. And then moving over to the right-hand side here is our traditional kind of touchscreen monitors. These are available from anywhere from 7 all the way up to 65 inches today. You compare this with what we have, we call it the Android Compute Engine, we actually call it the backpack. And this is really the compute solution from this middle I-Series in a kind of form factor that allows you to hook it up to a touchscreen monitor. We also have open frames here, and I've got a couple of slides on these to explain that in more detail. All of these devices, with the Android operating system, can be connected, as I mentioned, by our Elo View content and device management software. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about touchscreen monitors in particular. Our kind of standard touchscreen product range is from 7 to 27 inches. We still do a lot of standard aspect ratio screens. So the 15, 17, 19, these are the 4:3 aspect ratio. These have been around for a long time. They're still very popular. We do these now in a modern PCAP kind of zero bezel type look, right? So it looks more modern, but the form factor fits really well on, especially in retail, on small desks where there's limited space for the width, right? In the wide aspect ratio, we have all the way from 7 to 27 inches. So this is really where everyone moves to eventually, right? The O2 series is our latest series on this product. And the smaller screens are now moving over to USB-C type architecture. So the advantage here being that you can run power, touch, and video over a single cable connection. So the 7, the 10, 13, 15, they will all move to the USB-C type architecture. Again, these monitors have this, what we call Edge Connect, which is the micro USB connector on the edges of the device, allows you to plug in any of those accessories. So you can get, barcode scanner, you can get a EMV reader, connect it to the side of this monitor, run the USB cable back to your computer solution, and you have a complete solution in one easy step. We also have a medical grade range, maybe not so interesting to this audience, but there's what we call the O3 series is medical grade, so 60, 601 and IP54, designed for medical type environments, available in white and black. And then I mentioned the Android backpack. We also have a Windows equivalent to this. This is called Elo POSPack. This is relatively new. This gives you this kind of, this gives you a window compute engine. So you pair this with one of our touchscreen monitors, you put this under the desk, for example, and you have a complete touch solution, touch computer. Okay, let's talk about open frame. So open frame is really, if you think about a monitor as a really completely finished unit that you would put on a desk, the open frame is the kind of next level down. So this is not a finished product as such. It's designed to be mounted into something else. So, you know, typically these, you can't see the back here, but on the side we have a gasket. On the back we have a nice metal chassis with mounting points, and you drop this into a kiosk or a piece of equipment, and it gives you a, you know, fully vetted, fully type approved solution that you can just drop into a piece of equipment and have a complete touchscreen monitor. You know, designed really, we see a lot of these in kiosk type applications. Again, available standard aspect ratios along with the wide aspect ratios. Also now introducing some high bright versions. So 24 inches out now, the 27 inches coming soon. The 27 is a 1500 nit high bright outdoor type product. So really designed for a pickup cabinet or something like that we're beginning to see really a lot of growth in that space, designed to be outside. I mentioned the Elo backpack. This is a picture of it here. So this is our Android compute engine. So this allows you to connect again any open frame or monitor or even a touch display module with a backpack with an Android compute engine. Allows you then to connect that to our cloud service and manage your installation remotely. These products available all the way to 55 inches today. Another useful feature perhaps of these is this what we call touch through. So this allows you to change the mode of the touch controller in the open frame when you put it behind a bigger, thicker piece of glass. So you think about vandal resistance, you can add 5-6 millimeters of additional glass to the front of these monitors, make a change in the on OSD, and switch it to a mode where it will work through those extra thick glass. They're very robust. They are designed as, you know, for the particularly thick cover glass on these devices, designed for that industrial environment, designed for a factory type environment. And there's a good example of that coming up in the use cases. Okay, let's talk more about components and customized modules. So this is what we call a touch display module. So this is really designed as a, you know, one-stop shop for industrial HMI type applications. So if you think about implementing an HMI in some industrial device, if that's, you know, something like a robot, we supply a complete bonded touchscreen and display panel. You can see here, this is the touch controller, this is the display controller. This allows you to drop this one-piece solution into your final product and drive it and use it as a touchscreen HMI. We spent many years selling just touchscreens to market, right? When the end customer, the OEM, would integrate those touchscreens into a piece of equipment. What we found is most recently, in the last couple of years, most of those OEMs now moving over to wanting more of an integrated solution. So they don't want to buy an LCD from someone and a touch panel from someone else and then put this thing together, right? They want one solution from one supplier. And so we started doing these modules really on a custom basis. We have a standard 7-inch, a standard 10 1.1 inch, and a standard 15.6 inch. Those are designed to get people up and running very quickly with this solution. And then you can request a customization. And really, customization is key for Elo's OEM business. We certainly have a number of designs in different sizes already, so we can usually find something to fit your application. But you may want a different display, you may want, you know, higher bright, you may want different resolution, you may want your logo on this, and that's the type of thing that Elo specializes in, is doing that for our end customers. We also have the ability now to add the kind of the driver board electronics, right? So you can then just drive this with HDMI or VGA or something. We also have the touch controllers everything available from one source. Typically these are tape bonded or optically bonded solutions, and we can make sure that we pick the right touch controller solution for your application, whether that's you need thick gloves in a factory environment or working with a robot. You need liquid rejection if you're in a particularly wet environment, something like that. We can pick the right solution, tune that for your needs. Okay, now I'm going to hand back over to Jim to talk a little.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Can you verify you can hear me? Did have a bit of an audio drop then.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, thank you. So yeah, going to talk about a couple of three use cases now. So just to give some background about some examples. So the first one is Six River Systems in the US. So just to explain a bit about background, but then we're going to show a short video. So the application, based in the US, application is robotic. It's a cart for warehouse automation. So you'll see in the video, but our touch screen, the user interacts with the screen, and they can then follow the process through. So yeah, the video is better to see. So this is our 1002. So this is a 10-inch touch monitor. So you can see it's obviously a really cool application, and the screens, the person can interact with the screen and make some interventions, or they can always change things or change the program or call for assistance. So it's it's a really nice way for the user to interact with that rather than cumbersome buttons and levers and things like that. So yeah, that's like I say, that's our 1002 touch monitor. Next one is Renault in France. So obviously everybody knows the brand. This is their production line for building the cars, of course. So this is our Android all-in-one, we call it iSeries, which is our all-in-one device, which Paul mentioned already. And that's using their production line displays. So you can see there that it's the 15-inch and the 22-inch version. So there's different applications within the factory. Sometimes the 22 is the right size, sometimes it's the 15. It just depends. The same aspect ratio, I should say, and the same, because it's our unified architecture, you can, if the app works on one of the screens, it's going to work on all of the screens. They could even put a large format signage on the wall with our Android backpack, and the app would just work because it's always the same Android platform. It's the same chipset. It's a tried and touch on that. So yeah, this is production line displays. It's obviously the French company, but global rollout. So we've done some great business there, and it's continuing to roll out. There's a little quote there from one of their project managers there, who's one of our key contacts on that. And there are obvious benefits, right? It's easy for operators to use. It's not pen and paper. It can be changed real time. It can be, everything can be controlled centrally. Reduces downtime, increases efficiencies. So that's again an obvious use case, and we're seeing this quite a lot these days now. So warehouse automation, production lines, some of the big names that Brian mentioned in the Elo is everywhere or Elo is industrial slide at the beginning. A lot of these in that warehousing space are using this kind of application. It's becoming really, really common these days. So we see that as a really exciting area for us. And, I think it's really worth mentioning that our Android devices are not consumer devices. These are industrial, commercial grade devices. They are very rugged, very durable. And, these companies wouldn't be putting them in if they weren't, really, fit for purpose and really strong and durable. And that's where we see one of our strengths, because that's really kind of our DNA is the culture of quality, and we design it with quality in mind. So that's reflected in the customer base we have in this market, really. So we can go to the next one, please. So this next one's a Magnum Peering in the US. So this is a machine control for a industrial cutting device. So we have got a video again that will show it in action, so to speak. Hope you're wearing your goggles. It gets bright. So you can, move on there. So you can see, obviously, this is a pretty heavy industrial application. Our screen's built into the the interface. Unfortunately, we're not sharing audio at this point, but I can assure you they're saying extremely positive things about Elo and their interaction with us. In this case, it's one of our open frame devices. So that's, as Paul mentioned, that's the one that's not a finished product. It has to be built into the metal enclosure. So it gives it that nice robustness. It's not hanging off a wall or anything like that. It's really built in. You can see there that the operator's using gloves. So this is actually a PCAP display, but we've done a special tuning file so that it can work with these relatively thick gloves. And as we all know from using our iPhones or Android phones, using gloves with them is not the norm. But because this is our business and we invented the touch, then we often do custom tuning files to work with different types of gloves. So this is very typical for us and no issue at all. And you can see there as well, it's getting a high level of touch accuracy. This is not, he's not having to tap the screen 20 times to get it working like on the old car navigation systems when they first came out. You have to hit them 5 times. This is it's high performance. It's the same performance you would expect from your smartphone in terms of touch performance, but he's doing it through gloves. In an industrial application, we don't want him to have to take his gloves off, of course, to get that same performance. So. Thank you. So yeah, that was some 3 use case examples from us. Obviously, we have many more, but we're not going to, we'll run out of time if we talk about too many. So with that, I will hand you back to Brian for the conclusion.
So thanks, Jim, and thank you guys for joining today. We appreciate your time and attention. Elo is super excited to be enabling the digital transformation for a lot of these companies. Today, we focused in really on the factory environment, truly industrial factory environment, but you can really cut and paste for a lot of different environments, such as commercial kitchen or an office building, or even a factory warehouse setting. So Elo solutions are between the touch solutions and unified architecture are helping to really transform these spaces to the digital age, and we're happy to be part of it. And thank you again.
Jim, Paul, Brian, thank you very much for that very insightful presentation, which leads us into the Q&A section of this webinar. I do have a few questions for you all. Paul, you mentioned earlier how the Elo handheld mobile computer is purpose-built for industrial environments. How rugged are Elo's touchscreens and devices in industrial environments?
So, I mean, we have, I'll tell you that we have touchscreens that are still out there operating after, 40 years, right? Especially, we have some specific examples in Japan that are over 40 years old. They're really designed, we work with, much thicker glass, chemical strengthening. We design that product to fit your use case, right? So, if you need a very high level of drop test or you need a very high impact resistance, then we can design to fit that. Our standard products range in specification, right? The open frame products particularly designed for, as you saw in that video, that type of environment.
Thank you. My next question isn't directed at anyone in particular, so please feel free to jump in. Is there a need or a requirement? Have you seen a requirement for screens larger than 27 inches in size, or is that really the maximum?
I'll jump in there, John. Thank you. So what we're seeing in terms of an application in this factory environment is something called digital twin. Mm-hmm. And what a lot of companies are doing now is they're creating a digital footprint of their factory for a couple different reasons. For the purpose of automating and creating efficiencies, so they can see the layout. They're able to optimize based on the layout, number one. And number two, what they're able to do is bring customers in, and without walking them through the factory floor, they can walk them through a virtual tour on these large touchscreens. 65-inch is where we go up to. And so there are some applications such as this, as well as dashboarding in the factory. So we do see the concentration or the volume of touchscreens, would say 27 and below, but we also do see some applications as we move forward for the larger touchscreens in these factory environments.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian. My next question, why is Android the preferred architecture for the factory floor? And have you explored other architectures before landing on Android?
Yeah, I would say to some extent we're we can be architecture independent, right? We can create a solution for Windows. I mean, we came from a Windows world. We can also create solutions for Linux, right? But we settled on Android as our kind of as our major offering due to the security updates that Android comes with. Mm-hmm. The focus on a kind of more mobile type architecture that gives us the ability to do things like the handheld device. Gives us the ability to run a cloud type service, right? So that's really why we focus on Android. But we are to some extent, independent of the software. If someone needs a solution for Linux, for example.
I think it's also worth mentioning. I mean, we've mentioned during the presentation many times about our Elo View solution tied in with the Android OS, and it's not mandatory to have Elo View if using Android. So if a customer is already familiar with Android and they've already got their own mobile device management system, then we don't say that it's mandatory to have Elo View. It's just there's a lot of benefits with that. So yeah, just wanted to point that out. We are, as Paul said, we are actually agnostic in terms of operating system, but we promote Android and the Elo View platform, but it's not mandatory.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jim. That may tie in actually to a question we just received from Andre Chippil, who asks which software is needed to design content for Elo View?
Yeah, I'll try. So Elo View is a cloud-based interface, if you like. So you connect your devices, whether a backpack or it's an iSeries or something like that. You connect that to the cloud. You manage that from a cloud, from a web interface that can be on any device, right? On any PC or mobile device, etc. What we deliver to the device to run as is an application, is an APK, is a standard Android application. So these are GMS certified devices. You can load standard APK type applications. So if you really want, you could run crazy, some crazy games or something on your device, download it from the Play Store. So it's just a standard Android APK.
Brilliant. You can also run web scripts. So some apps now are written as web-based apps. URLs. You can run standard URLs for displaying websites. A lot of companies have maybe their software on a public URL or a private URL, of course, if they're using it in a non-consumer facing environment. You can also run what we call a track loop. So you could have, I mean, it's not maybe as applicable for the industrial market, but in retail, for example, you can run a video as in a track loop. And then when the customer touches the screen, it goes from the video into behind that, it goes into the application, which might be, a product finder or something like that. So, there's no reason why in an industrial environment you couldn't use in a track loop to show a safety video or show a scrolling message about for example, safety or various other messaging. Tap it, you then go to the application. So it's, there are APKs, but there are also web scripts and URLs and more simple things as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jim. Again, the next question isn't directed at any one person in particular, but where do touch screens fit into a post-COVID workplace where employees may be a bit more wary of using devices that they need to physically touch?
I can take that one. So what we're seeing in terms of COVID, I think it's a great question, John. What we're seeing in terms of COVID is less and less human-to-human contact and more contact between human and machine. When you touch a touch screen, whether it be in a public environment or private factory environment, you have control over your interaction. For instance, you touch the touch screen and you can sanitize or wash your hands. Whereas human-to-human contact, there's less control over that because you don't have control over that distance a lot of times between those two humans. That's number one, is that we're moving towards more of a contactless world. And in terms of COVID, it has driven us to this point. And we're also seeing more and more people wanting to interact with screens instead of that person-to-person, and it makes people feel a lot safer.
Thank you, Brian. I have another question, well, for all of you actually. As smart factories and manufacturing in particular continue to evolve, how does Elo see its future generations of touchscreens and interactive devices evolving? What will they be able to do that they can't currently do?
Great question.
That's a great question.
I think, one application that you're going to see coming up in terms of robotics, John, is the fact that with the questionable workforce, for instance, with COVID, the workforce has been reduced here and there because of whether it's illness or people needing to cut back. And you won't see replacement of that workforce, but you will see more and more automation of items, such as in the robot space. Think about robots in the back of house when you get a delivery. Being able to take that delivery from the loading dock all the way to the storage location where it will reside. So we don't see that very often today, but we're seeing that as a trend. And part of it is driven by COVID, for sure. And part of it is driven by the fact that it creates efficiencies there, and it relies less on the human and more on the machine.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I would add that we've seen more and more. I mean, the touch technology is coming along quick and fast, right? And especially in displays as well, right? But we start to see more and more touch screens outside. In tougher environments where they've traditionally been very difficult to operate. So we're beginning to see evolution of that, right? So we'll start to see more and more kind of pickup cabinet type things again. As Brian mentioned, less people-to-people reaction interfacing, right? But more of a, you walk up to a pizza place and you pick up your pizza by pressing on a button on the outside of the screen.
Brilliant. And finally, does Elo see the industrial sector perhaps maybe overtaking your more traditional markets in terms of where your products are going?
Yes, definitely. So of course it's at the moment, looking at the growth rates that we looked at earlier in the presentation, those growth rates in industrial as an overall market and the collaborative robots are very aggressive. And we believe that our market share within that will also increase as we're bringing new products to the market. Retail, which is one of our core markets historically, has been great for us, but for obvious reasons at the moment, especially the hospitality market is not in great shape. That'll recover to an extent, of course, next year. But no, we see these kind of, we see that's really a sweet spot for us. We've always been, have had the highest quality in the market, had really the most rugged and durable products in our category in the market. And, we're now seeing that they've been, used in industrial, they're going to be used more and more and more, whether it's Android, whether it's, any operating system. So we definitely see that. I don't know, Brian, if you want to add anything to that.
No, well said, Jim. I think you're right on.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of this webinar. Before we wrap up, I'd like to thank Elo Touch Solutions for sponsoring the webinar, and thank you once again to Jim Foster, Paul Futter, and Brian Atwood for joining us this afternoon. Today's webinar will be available to view on demand from tomorrow afternoon at www.roboticsandinnovation.co.uk in case you'd like to refer back to the presentation or share it with a colleague. Well, that's it. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. I'm John Thornton, editor of Robotics and Innovation magazine, and I'll see you again soon.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
you.